I'd like to talk a little bit about one of the initiatives within VICS that we actually consider one of our strongest areas of endeavor, and that's CPFR, Collaborative Planning, Forecasting, and Replenishment. I'd like to provide a little overview of the process model that we've developed and a little bit of the foundational elements that go into collaborative business management. That will include a discussion around change management and the building of trust in a trading partner relationship, the CPFR model, and then benefits of collaboration, and finally a CPFR assessment and onboarding process example that we've worked on over the years. As I mentioned, VICS is a non-profit supply chain professionals association, and we're now entering our 25th year, and very happy to talk with you today. A little bit about CPFR, as I mentioned. Collaborative Planning, Forecasting, and Replenishment has been around since the mid-1990s, and VICS holds the trademark on the business process. You can see the model over to the right. I'll get into that in more detail in a little bit, but what I'd like to mention at this point is that we are the only association authorized to provide CPFR training, and if you're interested, I have information on that. Since 2006, when our program began, we've certified hundreds of practitioners. In fact, just last year and in 2009, we certified over 250 practitioners. So collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment is built on a single foundation, and that is foundation of trust. Internally, employees and management, departments and divisions must demonstrate trust to one another, your internal customers, if you will, and externally, that same level of trust must be conveyed to your trading partners, be it suppliers, customers, and consumers. Trust begins with by allowing members of the supply chain team to rely on each other. Equally important, a lack of trust, as we found, is the greatest obstacle to achieving supply chain collaboration. In fact, many independent studies have shown the long-term value of trust-based collaboration up and down the supply chain. By that I mean that with the presence of trust across the trading partner relationships, it's far easier to achieve the benefits and objectives that you look to gain through a collaborative business relationship by having that foundation of trust. So what we've identified through some research that was developed by an academic that we're very close to, Dr. Stanley Fawcett, is that there are 5 key behaviors that cultivate this culture of trust that I mentioned is so important. Number 1, day-to-day promises met. If you say you're going to do something and you'll have a product available, the shipment will leave on such and such a date, keeping those promises is extremely important to maintaining that level of trust across trading partner relationships. Open rather than selective information sharing. If the news isn't going to be good, let's say the shipment is going to be late, the product wasn't ready on the time that it was supposed to be, it's always better to hear that bad news early rather than late, and to be able to develop as far in advance a contingency plan that will smooth out the wrinkles in the supply chain that result from the failure. Behavior that communicates that the other party is a valued team member. Treating your trading partners as you would like them to treat you. A very common golden rule approach, but nonetheless extremely important. And building personal relationships, getting to know your trading partner, your customer, your supplier on a personal level is extremely important to being able to communicate a level of trust and an important foundational element of the business relationship. And then relationships that are mutually viewed as fair and beneficial. We all like to feel that we're being treated fairly and that we're not suffering at the advantage of the other person in the relationship. What I have on the screen now is what I like to refer to as the bow tie model. It's a traditional buyer and seller relationship that occurred through channels of communication being funneled only between the sales rep and the buyer. Very typical, as I mentioned, a traditional selling model that funneled all communication through that single point, conceivably so that there was no miscommunication across the partners, but at the same time leaves a lot of room for error or miscommunication of vital information as you think more broadly across the supply chain. So for example, marketing and merchandising. All of those communications would have had to been funneled through that single level of communication. A more functional approach, what I like to refer to as the butterfly model, shows how by aligning the responsibilities, that is sales rep and buyer, marketing and merchandising, the suppliers, customer service, and manufacturing organizations with the retailers, store operations, and warehousing functions, allows for much more focused communication. And as long as it's headed up by a single organization who has ultimate responsibility and supported by senior management, we found that this open level of communication is much more successful in building collaborative relationships. So as we start to talk about the business process itself, CPFR, what we first identified were time frames by which various components, you can see 9 of them here on this chart, various timelines at which the various components of the process model are centered around. So for example, on a yearly basis, partners begin to develop a very broad collaboration agreement. As they start to get into the quarterly time frames, a joint business plan is prepared. And as you get even more granular, as you can see on a weekly basis, for example, sales forecasts and the executional elements of creating the forecast and generating the order, all of those begin to take shape then based on the foundations that were laid out in the collaboration agreement and the joint business plan. So as you start to look at our CPFR model, as I mentioned, I was going to explain that in more detail. These are the 8 collaboration tasks that occur within these 4 quadrants that you can see over on the right. So for example, within strategy and planning, you'll find the broad-based collaboration agreement and the joint business plan. As you start to align demand and supply, you'll see the sales forecasting and order forecasting processes begin to take place. And then as the executional layers come into the picture, order generation and order fulfillment become part of the process model. And then finally, in the analytical stage, this could either be during the process or on a post-analysis basis. Exception management and performance assessment are key elements. Now what I'd like to show you next is how those 8 functional elements can be divided among the trading partners. So if you look in the outer ring, the manufacturer's area, you can see that within the collaboration agreement framework, that's the manufacturer's account planning process, which aligns with